You swore you'd never date someone like that again. You promised yourself this job would be different. You vowed that this time, you wouldn't explode in anger, wouldn't shut down emotionally, wouldn't sabotage something good right when it started working. And yet, here you are again. Same argument. Different person. Same crushing anxiety before success. Different opportunity. Same inexplicable urge to run when someone gets too close. Different relationship. It's like watching a movie you've seen 100 times, except you're the actor who forgot they're just reading the same script over and over. You feel like you're going insane. How can you know what you're doing wrong and still do it? How can you desperately want change and somehow end up in the exact same place? It's as if some invisible hand keeps dragging you back to scenarios you've already lived, emotions you've already felt, pain you've already endured. What if I told you this isn't a coincidence? What if I told you there's a reason, buried deep in your unconscious mind, wired into your neural pathways, encoded in your earliest memories, that compels you to repeat these patterns? And what if I told you that until you understand why you're trapped in this loop, you'll never break free? Welcome to the psychology of repetition. This is the story of why you can't stop reliving your past, and what it takes to finally write a different future. The repetition compulsion. Let's start with a man who discovered something disturbing about the human mind over a century ago. Sigmund Freud, for all his controversial theories, stumbled upon something undeniable while treating patients in Vienna. He noticed that his patients weren't just victims of their past traumas, they were actively recreating them. A woman abused by her father would marry an abusive husband. A man abandoned by his mother would choose emotionally unavailable partners who'd eventually leave him. Soldiers returning from World War I would have nightmares that forced them to relive their worst battlefield moments over and over. Freud called this the repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate unresolved conflicts, hoping that this time, the story will end differently. Think about that for a moment. Your unconscious mind isn't trying to torture you. It's trying to master the trauma. It's like a child who falls off a bike and immediately wants to try again. Except instead of a bike, it's your entire emotional life. And instead of learning to balance, you keep crashing in the exact same way. Here's where it gets darker. Freud realized that the repetition compulsion often operates against the pleasure principle, the idea that humans seek pleasure and avoid pain. People were choosing pain. Not consciously, of course. But somewhere deep in their psyche, there was a force stronger than the desire for happiness. The need to resolve what was left unfinished. Imagine you grow up with a parent who is impossible to please. No matter what you accomplish, it's never enough. You never receive the validation you crave. That wound doesn't heal, it festers. And your unconscious mind becomes obsessed with solving that equation. How do I finally become enough? So what do you do as an adult? You unconsciously seek out bosses, romantic partners, even friends who are impossible to please. You work yourself to exhaustion trying to earn their approval. You twist yourself into shapes that don't fit who you are. And when you inevitably fail, when they leave or criticize or remain indifferent, you feel that familiar ache. The same one from childhood. But here's the cruelest twist, that ache feels like home. Your unconscious mind mistakes familiarity for safety. It doesn't matter that the pattern is destroying you. What matters is that it's known. And the known, even when painful, feels safer than the unknown. You might be thinking, but I hate these patterns. I'm not choosing this. And you're right. Consciously, you're not. But your unconscious mind has a different agenda. It believes that if it can just recreate the original scenario and change the outcome, it can finally heal the original wound. A woman whose father left when she was 7 doesn't consciously think, I'm going to fall in love with emotionally distant men so I can prove I'm worthy of staying. But her unconscious mind is driven by that exact logic. If she can make this man stay, she can retroactively prove that she wasn't the reason her father left. She can rewrite the story where she's not abandoned, not unlovable, not defective. Except it never works. Because you can't heal a childhood wound through an adult relationship. You can't resolve your father's abandonment by making your boyfriend commit. You can't earn your mother's love by impressing your boss. The equation is unsolvable, but your unconscious mind will spend your entire life trying to solve it anyway. This is why you keep choosing the same type of person. Why you recreate the same conflicts. Why you sabotage relationships right when they're about to become real. Your unconscious is running a program installed decades ago, and it doesn't care that the program is destroying your present. It only cares about resolving the past. But the repetition compulsion isn't just psychological theory. It has a physical component. It's literally wired into your brain. Neural pathways and the comfort of familiarity. Your brain is the most sophisticated pattern recognition machine in the known universe. It's constantly looking for shortcuts, creating efficient pathways for repeated behaviors. Neuroscientists call these neural pathways connections between brain cells that strengthen with use. Every time you repeat a behavior, think a thought, or feel an emotion, you strengthen the neural pathway associated with it. It's like walking through a forest. The first time, you have to push through thick brush. But if you walk the same route every day, eventually you create a path. Then a trail. Then a highway. Your emotional patterns work the same way. Let's say every time you face criticism, you respond with defensiveness and anger. The first time this happened, probably in childhood, your brain forged a connection. Criticism equals threat, anger equals protection. As a child, maybe anger was the only tool you had to maintain dignity when a parent was belittling you. But here's the problem. Your brain doesn't distinguish between a genuine threat and a perceived one. It doesn't matter if your partner is offering gentle feedback or your boss is providing constructive criticism. The pathway is already built. Criticism triggers the threat response, which triggers anger, which pushes people away, which confirms your unconscious belief that you're unacceptable as you are. And every single time you repeat this pattern, you reinforce the pathway. You make it stronger, faster, more automatic. But here's where it gets really insidious. Your brain doesn't just build pathways for behaviors, it builds them for feelings. And some feelings, even negative ones, become chemically addictive. Dr. Joe Dispenza, a neuroscientist who studies the biology of change, explains that emotional states trigger specific neurochemical releases. When you feel anxious, your body releases cortisol and adrenaline. When you feel anger, your body releases norepinephrine and testosterone. When you feel depressed, your serotonin levels drop and inflammation increases. If you've spent your entire life in a state of anxiety, your body has become addicted to the chemical cocktail of anxiety. Your cells have developed receptors specifically for those stress hormones. And when you're not anxious, when life is actually calm and safe, your body starts craving the chemical state it's used to. This is why people in therapy often say, "I know I should feel happy about this new relationship, but something feels wrong." What feels wrong isn't the relationship, it's the absence of familiar pain. Your body is withdrawing from its drug of choice, dysfunction. Think about that. You're not just psychologically attached to your patterns, you're chemically dependent on them. This explains why change feels so impossibly hard. It's not just about willpower or wanting it badly enough. It's about fighting against neural pathways that have been reinforced for decades and a body that's literally addicted to the emotions those patterns produce. When you meet someone who's actually emotionally available, your brain sounds alarm bells. This doesn't match the template. This isn't familiar. Abort. Abort. You might experience this as a sudden loss of attraction, a vague feeling of something's off, or an inexplicable urge to sabotage the relationship. Your conscious mind says, "This person is wonderful. They're everything I said I wanted." But your unconscious mind and your body are screaming, "This is terrifying. This isn't love as we know it. We need to get back to familiar territory." And familiar territory is chaos, unavailability, or emotional distance. Because that's what your neural pathways recognize as love. That's what your body is addicted to. The same pattern applies to success. If you grew up in an environment where achievement was punished, where success made you a target for jealousy, or where your accomplishments were ignored, Your brain built a pathway. Success equals danger. As an adult, right when you're about to close a big deal, get the promotion, or launch the business, you sabotage yourself. You procrastinate. You pick a fight with a colleague. You make an uncharacteristic mistake. And your conscious mind is baffled. Why did I do that? I wanted this. But your unconscious mind just kept you safe. It steered you back to familiar territory, struggle, almost success, or failure. Because that's where the neural pathways lead. That's where the chemical comfort lies. This is the neuroscience of repetition. You're not weak. You're not broken. You're not doomed. But you are operating with a nervous system that was wired in the past and is now controlling your present. And that wiring, it started earlier than you think. Attachment blueprints and the template of love. Close your eyes for a moment and think about your earliest memories of love. Not romantic love, primal love. The love between a child and their caregivers. Was it safe? Was it consistent? Did you cry and find comfort, or cry and find emptiness? Did you explore the world knowing you could return to safety, or did you learn that love was conditional, unpredictable, or absent? These experiences, before you could even form sentences, created what psychologists call your attachment style, the blueprint for how you relate to others for the rest of your life. Dr. John Bowlby and Dr. Mary Ainsworth conducted groundbreaking research in the 1950s and 60s, observing how infants responded to separation from their mothers. What they discovered was stunning. By 18 months old, a child has already developed a template for relationships that will govern their adult romantic partnerships, friendships, and even professional relationships. There are 4 main attachment styles. Secure attachment develops when caregivers are consistently responsive, emotionally available, and attuned to the child's needs. These children learn that love is safe, that people can be trusted, and that their emotions are valid. As adults, they're comfortable with intimacy, able to communicate needs, and resilient through conflict. Anxious attachment develops when caregivers are inconsistent, sometimes nurturing, sometimes neglectful or intrusive. The child never knows which version of the parent they'll get, so they become hypervigilant, constantly monitoring for signs of abandonment. As adults, they're often clingy, needing constant reassurance, terrified of rejection, and prone to reading danger into neutral situations. Avoidant attachment develops when caregivers are emotionally distant, dismissive, or consistently unresponsive to the child's emotional needs. The child learns that expressing needs leads to rejection, so they suppress their emotions and become self-reliant to an extreme. As adults, they're uncomfortable with intimacy, resistant to dependency, and tend to flee when relationships become too close. Disorganized attachment develops when caregivers are frightening or abusive. The person who's supposed to be the source of safety is also the source of threat. These children develop contradictory strategies, both seeking and fearing closeness. As adults, they have chaotic relationships, swinging between desperate clinging and hostile withdrawal. Here's the devastating part. Your attachment style becomes the lens through which you perceive reality. It's not just how you behave, it's what you literally see and expect from others. If you have anxious attachment, you'll interpret your partner's need for alone time as evidence of abandonment. If you have avoidant attachment, you'll interpret your partner's need for closeness as suffocation. If you have disorganized attachment, you'll create the very chaos you fear because it's the only relational dynamic that feels real to you. And here's where the repetition happens. You unconsciously seek out partners who confirm your attachment blueprint. A woman with anxious attachment doesn't consciously choose emotionally unavailable men. But in a room full of potential partners, she'll feel chemistry only with the ones who trigger her attachment system. The ones who are inconsistent, ambiguous, just out of reach. The secure, available men feel boring or like friends because they don't activate the familiar attachment anxiety that her body has learned to associate with love. A man with avoidant attachment doesn't consciously avoid intimacy, but he'll feel sudden disgust or panic when a partner expresses emotional needs. He'll pick partners who are equally distant, or he'll create distance through criticism, stonewalling, or infidelity. And when the relationship ends, he'll feel relief, confirmation that he was right all along, that commitment is a trap. This isn't malicious. This isn't a character flaw. This is your brain running software installed before you were 3 years old. Dr. Amir Levine and Rachel Heller, in their book Attached, describe how attachment styles interact. When an anxious person dates an avoidant person, they create an anxious avoidant trap, a dance where the anxious person pursues, which makes the avoidant person retreat, which makes the anxious person pursue harder, which makes the avoidant person retreat further. Both are responding to the other's behavior, but both are really just acting out their original childhood template. The anxious person thinks, if only they'd commit, I'd feel secure. The avoidant person thinks, if only they'd stop smothering me, I'd feel safe. But the truth is, both would feel terrified if they got what they think they want, because it doesn't match their attachment blueprint. This is why you keep choosing the wrong person. Your definition of chemistry is actually just your nervous system recognizing familiar attachment patterns. Your concept of love is whatever your caregivers taught you love looks like, even if what they taught you is chaos, neglect, or conditional approval. And until you update the blueprint, you'll keep building the same house. Different materials, same floor plan. Different location, same rooms. Different person, same relationship. But there's another force at play, even more hidden than attachment styles. It's the part of you that you've disowned, and it's running the show from the shadows. The shadow self and unconscious sabotage. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology, proposed a concept that still makes people uncomfortable: the shadow. The shadow is the part of your psyche that contains all the traits, desires, and impulses you've deemed unacceptable. Everything your parents punished you for, everything society shamed you for, everything you decided was not you. It all goes into the shadow. But it doesn't disappear. It just operates from the darkness, outside conscious awareness. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The shadow doesn't just contain negative traits. It contains parts of you that are powerful, creative, sexual, ambitious, angry, selfish. Anything you learned was too much, too dangerous, too different. If you grew up in a family where anger was forbidden, your anger goes into the shadow. If you grew up in a culture where sexuality was shameful, your sexual desire goes into the shadow. If you grew up with a parent who couldn't handle your success, your ambition goes into the shadow. And from the shadow, these disowned parts of you control your life. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Here's how the shadow creates repetition. Projection. You see in others what you can't see in yourself. If you've disowned your anger, you'll attract angry people or perceive anger in neutral situations. If you've disowned your neediness, you'll be disgusted by needy people, while unconsciously acting out neediness in covert ways. You're not reacting to who they are, you're reacting to the part of yourself they're mirroring back to you. Sabotage. When you approach something that would require you to integrate your shadow, you sabotage yourself. Let's say you've disowned your ambition because it made a parent jealous. As an adult, every time you're about to succeed, your shadow sabotages the opportunity. Because success would force you to own your ambition, which would violate the internal rule you made decades ago. Attraction to the opposite. You're often attracted to people who openly express what you've repressed. If you've disowned your spontaneity and become rigidly controlled, you'll be drawn to chaotic, impulsive people. If you've disowned your need for security and become hyper-independent, you'll be drawn to clingy, dependent people. You're not attracted to them despite their traits. You're attracted to them because those traits represent your disowned shadow. The pattern repeats because the shadow keeps creating situations that would force integration, if only you'd recognize what's happening. Imagine a man who grew up with a mother who was emotionally engulfing and a father who was absent. To survive, he disowned his own needs, becoming the caretaker, the one who solved everyone else's problems. His need for care, for vulnerability, for being held, all of that went into the shadow. As an adult, he's attracted to women who are emotionally needy. He becomes their therapist, their savior, their rock. He tells himself he's generous, compassionate, selfless. But the truth is, he's living vicariously through their neediness. He's feeding his disowned need for care by caring for them. But eventually, he feels suffocated. He feels resentful. He doesn't understand why. After all, he's the one giving. But what he can't see is that he's rage at his own disowned needs. He's angry that no one cares for him, but he's chosen partners who are incapable of it, and he's constructed an entire identity around not needing care. So he leaves, finds another needy woman, repeats the cycle. And every time, he's playing out the same shadow dynamic, disowning his needs while being compulsively drawn to express them through others. Or consider a woman who grew up in a family that valued intellectual achievement above all else. Emotions were weakness. Vulnerability was pathetic. So she disowned her tenderness, her softness, her need for emotional connection. She became hyper-rational, successful, independent. As an adult, she's attracted to emotionally expressive but often chaotic men. She tells herself she wants a partner who's emotionally open, but what she really wants is to experience emotions through them without having to own them herself. And when their emotions become too much, when they cry, when they need her tenderness, when they make her feel, she becomes cold, critical, dismissive. She's punishing them for expressing what she's disowned in herself. And then she leaves, confirms that emotional men are weak, and finds another one. The pattern repeats because the shadow needs integration, but she keeps externalizing it instead. Jung believed the only path to wholeness was shadow work, the painful process of recognizing, owning, and integrating the disowned parts of yourself. Not acting them out unconsciously, but consciously choosing when and how to express them. This is terrifying work, because it means admitting you're not who you think you are. It means acknowledging that the person you've been criticizing in others is actually a reflection of yourself. It means giving up the comfortable identity you've constructed and allowing complexity, contradiction, and wholeness. But without shadow work, you're doomed to repeat the patterns. Because the shadow will keep creating scenarios designed to get your attention. And if you keep ignoring it, it will keep escalating. Real-world illustration. The story of Maya. Let me tell you about Maya. She's not a real person, but she's a composite of patterns I've seen countless times. Maya is 34, successful, intelligent, and perpetually single. She wants a relationship desperately, but every relationship follows the same script. She meets someone. There's intense chemistry. For the first few weeks, it's perfect. Deep conversations, passionate connection, a feeling of finally being seen. Then, around the 3-month mark, something shifts. She starts noticing flaws. He's too available. He texts too much. He's too eager to commit. She feels suffocated. She picks fights. She becomes critical. She creates distance. And either she ends it, or her withdrawal drives him away. Then she feels abandoned, confirms that all men leave, and 6 months later, meets someone new. The cycle begins again. Maya has anxious avoidant attachment, a combination pattern. Her father was emotionally distant. Her mother was smothering and inconsistent. As a child, Maya learned that love was a threat, mother, and that emotional needs led to rejection, father. So she developed a contradictory strategy: desperately crave intimacy, then run when she gets it. Her repetition compulsion is trying to solve an impossible equation. How do I get love without being engulfed or abandoned? But because both outcomes are wired into her blueprint, she creates both in every relationship. Her neural pathways are optimized for the anxiety relief anxiety cycle. The chemistry she feels isn't love, it's her nervous system recognizing the familiar pattern of uncertainty. The boring men who are actually secure don't trigger her attachment system, so she experiences no attraction. Her shadow contains her neediness and her aggression. She's disowned the part of her that desperately needs reassurance, because her mother made neediness shameful, and the part of her that wants to destroy intimacy, because intimacy feels dangerous. So she attracts needy men, projection of her disowned needs, and then becomes aggressive toward them, acting out her disowned anger at being needed. She knows all of this intellectually. She's been to therapy. She's read the books. She can describe her patterns perfectly. But knowledge doesn't break the cycle. Because the cycle isn't happening in her conscious mind, it's happening in her nervous system, her neural pathways, her shadow. Every relationship is the same relationship because she's bringing the same unconscious programming to each one. different person, same dance. And the truly tragic part is that a piece of her knows this. She can feel herself doing it. But she can't stop it. Until she can. Breaking the cycle. Here's the hope. Your brain is neuroplastic. Neural pathways can be weakened and new ones can be formed. Attachment styles can become more secure. Shadow content can be integrated. The chemical addiction to dysfunction can be broken. But here's the harsh truth. It requires something most people aren't willing to do. It requires you to stay present with discomfort, to override your automatic responses, and to choose the unfamiliar even when every cell in your body is screaming to return to the known. Awareness without judgment. The first step is seeing the pattern. Not just intellectually, but viscerally. You need to catch yourself in the act of repeating it. And this is harder than it sounds because your mind is a master rationalizer. When you're sabotaging a good relationship, your mind doesn't tell you you're sabotaging because this doesn't match your attachment blueprint. It tells you this person is wrong for you, or something just feels off. Your mind creates rational-sounding reasons for unconscious behaviors. You need to develop what psychologists call metacognition, the ability to observe your own thoughts and patterns without being consumed by them. You need to notice when you're acting out a pattern and name it. This is my anxious attachment being triggered, or this is my shadow sabotaging success, or this is my repetition compulsion trying to recreate my father's abandonment. Tolerate the unfamiliar. This is the hardest part. When you encounter a situation that doesn't match your template, a partner who's actually available, a success you didn't sabotage, a conflict you didn't escalate, your nervous system will panic. You'll feel wrong, anxious, suspicious. Your body will crave the familiar dysfunction. This is withdrawal from your emotional addiction. And you have to stay with it. Dr. Dispenza calls this crossing the river of change, the period where you're no longer the old you but not yet the new you. It's uncomfortable, disorienting, and every instinct tells you to go back. But this is where the new neural pathways form. You have to consciously choose the unfamiliar response. When your instinct is to run, you stay. When your instinct is to cling, you give space. When your instinct is to sabotage, you follow through. And every time you choose differently, you weaken the old pathway and strengthen a new one. Somatic release. Talk therapy alone often isn't enough because trauma and patterns are stored in the body. You need somatic practices, things that release the emotional charge stored in your nervous system. This might be somatic experiencing therapy, EMDR, breathwork, or even intensive physical movement. The goal is to discharge the accumulated stress and emotion that's keeping your nervous system locked in survival mode. Shadow integration. You need to do the terrifying work of owning your disowned parts. This means acknowledging the parts of yourself you've deemed unacceptable. Not acting them out destructively, but bringing them into consciousness and integrating them. If you've disowned your anger, you need to find healthy ways to express it. If you've disowned your neediness, you need to practice asking for help. If you've disowned your power, you need to take up space. This doesn't mean becoming someone you're not. It means becoming someone you are but have been hiding from. Secure relationships as healing. Attachment research shows that earned secure attachment is possible. Consistent exposure to secure relationships can actually rewire your attachment blueprint. But this requires you to choose differently, to date secure people even when they don't trigger intense chemistry, to stay in friendships with emotionally healthy people even when it feels boring. Over time, your nervous system recalibrates. What once felt boring starts feeling peaceful. What once felt safe starts feeling empty. Your definition of love updates. But this takes time. Neuroscientists estimate it takes 300 to 1,000 repetitions to build a new neural pathway, and 3,000 to 5,000 repetitions to replace an old one. That's not days. That's months or years of consistently choosing differently. Self-compassion through the process. You need to understand that you're not broken. You're not weak. You're operating with software installed during a time when you had no choice. Your patterns were adaptive in childhood. They kept you safe, helped you survive, allowed you to maintain attachment to caregivers even when they were inadequate. The pattern isn't the problem. The problem is that you're still running software designed for a reality that no longer exists. And updating that software is one of the hardest things a human can do. You'll fail. You'll relapse into old patterns. You'll repeat the cycle even after you swore you were done with it. That's not failure, that's neurobiology. The old pathways are still there, still strong. Every relapse is information, not condemnation. The question isn't whether you'll repeat the pattern. The question is, how quickly can you recognize it and course correct? The choice to repeat or rewrite. You've been living the same story in different settings. The characters change, the scenery shifts, but the plot remains identical. And it's not your fault that the story was written. It was written before you could read, before you could speak, before you could choose. But now you can choose. You can choose to see the pattern instead of being blind to it. You can choose to stay present with discomfort instead of fleeing to the familiar. You can choose to integrate your shadow instead of projecting it onto others. You can choose to build new neural pathways even when every cell in your body is pulling you back to the old ones. It won't be fast. It won't be easy. And it won't be linear. You'll have moments of breakthrough followed by months of relapse. You'll see the pattern clearly one day and be completely blind to it the next. You'll choose differently once and then repeat the same mistake 100 more times. But here's what changes. Eventually, you start catching yourself sooner. The cycle gets shorter. The awareness becomes more consistent. The new choice becomes slightly less uncomfortable. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not this year, you'll find yourself in a familiar situation, facing the same trigger, and you'll respond differently. Not because you forced yourself to, but because the new pathway has become stronger than the old one. You'll realize you just had a conflict with a partner and you didn't shut down. You just received success and you didn't sabotage it. You just felt love and you didn't run. And in that moment, you'll understand, you're no longer repeating the pattern. You're no longer trapped in the loop. You've rewritten the story. The past will always be part of you. The original wounds will always have left their marks. But you're no longer being controlled by them. You're no longer a prisoner of your unconscious programming. You're finally free to choose who you become. And that freedom, that's worth every uncomfortable moment of the journey. So ask yourself, which story are you living? The one written for you decades ago, or the one you're consciously choosing now? Because the pattern will continue until you interrupt it. And the only person who can interrupt it is you. The cycle is waiting to be broken. The question is, are you ready to break it?